I'm Dwayne Brummett. He's Ali Alberigo, and this is the School Owner Talk podcast. Hello again, Dwayne Brummett here with Ali Alberigo, SchoolOwnerTalk.com. Ali, I'm excited for today. We've got a special guest, and
Yes.
you know him. You knew him longer than I did, but we both know him. You want to introduce who we've got on today's podcast?
Of course. I think that, man, it's got to be 20 plus years or more that I know Master Oliver, and we've met through different conventions and different shows, and always at it. I have to say, he's always been super gracious and friendly and helpful, that I could call him my friend. And I'm excited that I got to know him over the years. And we had a few booths next to each other at different events where we'd sit and chat and, spend a lot of time, just talking about the industry. And he is a leader in the industry. He's just a legend in regards to coaching martial arts schools and teaching them how to run their schools. And so without further ado, this is Master Stephen Oliver, and welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. And it seems to me the industry has changed quite a bit. So there's probably a bunch of people watching the video who is new to the industry.
Yeah.
There was a shift to BJJ and MMA, but then there was the COVID mishandling that wiped a bunch of people out. I 40%. My background a little bit is, I went to college. I went to Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. with the idea I was going to go to Harvard, get an MBA, work in Wall Street.
Right.
But the reason I went to Washington, D.C., the reason I went to Georgetown was I had a job lined up for Junior Institute, and I thought I was going to be a world champion kickboxer. So I viewed this parallel of MBA, Wall Street type, and at the same time, I was moving there because we had Jeff Smith, who was the world champion, Rodney Batista, who was U.S. middleweight champion, Michael Coles, U.S. welterweight champion, and so forth. We had this big stable of kickboxers, and I thought I was going to be the next one. And I was talking to Don Wilson. I told him he's the reason I didn't pursue fighting professionally.
Right.
He was fighting the person I was working with directly in Washington, D.C., Rodney Batista, who I was terrified of. This guy.
Right.
He would hit the bag and the fifth floor would shake, and I used to hold a medicine ball and I'd get bruised on the other side. I mean, he was like the upper body of a heavyweight with kind of skinny legs, and he hit Don with an overhand right to the bridge of the nose. My immediate reaction was, "Oh my God, I'd be in a coma." And Don just smiled and ended up winning the fight on points. I told Don that story. It's like, oh, that's the moment I decided that $100 a round to have somebody trying to kill you was not worth it. But I went from there and moved to Denver, and this is now 42 years ago. It's hard to believe when you say we've known each other a long time. I'm guessing more than that. But I went to Denver and straight out of college opened 5 schools in 18 months, 6 schools in 36 months. Was $1 million operation, which in today's terms is $3.5 million or three million, something like that.
Yeah.
By the time I was 25 years old, which, to my knowledge, had never been done before. It may have, but really, in one sense, I was the kid with a silver spoon. I didn't come from money. My parents were lower middle class. I didn't have any funding to speak of, but I came from the Junior Institute, which was the most successful business operation probably that I'm aware of in the world at the time.
Right.
And in martial arts, and had everybody's support. I had Jeff Smith's support, who now works for me. I had Jun Rhee's support, may he rest in peace. I had Nick Okinis' support, who again has passed away recently. He was a mentor for many years. And from there, I've been, was in the business purely of owning and operate martial arts schools and running a big international tournament for, I don't know, about 25 years. So I was running mostly 6 locations in the Denver metro area. And then at some point, I decided to franchise the schools, go into coaching and consulting. And that may have been when we met. I wrote that first book on internet marketing in 1999. Think of how long ago that seems.
Yeah.
And it was in the era, most people aren't gonna sync with this. It's like talking about Yellow Pages and rotary phones, but it was in the era of Alta Vista was the #1 search engine. Yahoo was the #1 directory. Hope you can't hear that. I've got a a poodle barking in the background.
No
That's it.
worry.
Yeah, but but in that era, the other way you could do pay-per-click was there was a company called GoTo, which became Overture when it got bought by Yahoo, but it was the inspiration for Google. So, the world obviously has changed dramatically since then, but my contention is, and Dwayne, you'll appreciate this, on the marketing side, the internet is changing every couple of months, right? What's working on Google, what's working on Facebook. I've gone from hating Facebook to loving Facebook to being frustrated with Facebook, and in those cycles. But in the meantime, all the stuff I did to enroll 2,500 students in 18 months, 3,500 students in 18 months, with very rare exceptions, works just as well today, if not then, and in fact, it works better. So it's an interesting dichotomy to have, a long period of time. I went through a cycle where I was spending a fortune on short form and long form ads on TV. Nowadays, I wouldn't do it the same way, especially long form. Infomercials
Right.
are tough because, like, I don't know about you, but I either watch stuff that's on streaming,
Right.
like last night, that Presumed Innocence show.
Yeah. Oh,
uh,
great.
I stayed
Great
up
show,
too
right?
late. Yeah, I stayed up too late watching that one. But I don't even know what time things come on. I'm never channel surfing, so
Right.
that doesn't work.
Right.
I used to thrive on full page ads in the major daily newspaper. Back then, the Sunday edition had 800,000 distribution. I got to say, it still works. It's just that they're a shadow of their former self.
Right.
My favorite paper in the metro area went bankrupt. The second one is down to maybe 250,000 on Sunday and 100,000 during the week. But everything else I did to build the organization works better now because everybody is so fixated on, myself included, I wrote the first book on it, so fixated on digital that they miss the fact that if I'm the guy in the elementary school out there interacting with them, or if I'm at a live event where they're showing up, or if I'm anchored into the corporation and I'm their, fitness guru or their self-defense guru,
Right.
all these things not only work as well as they ever did, they work better. So it's an interesting dichotomy. Looking at 45 years, if people who are young right now are fixated on what email and it's got to be a Facebook ad that then gets sequential autoresponder email.
Right.
I got to tell you, when I wrote the book, I loved email. I mean, but that was in the era. Remember the movie of It's Got Mail, and Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan are sitting there staring, waiting for. No, nobody does that anymore. You get 200 emails a day. You're pissed off that you have to go through it. You don't open most of them. You very rarely read something. And I'll tell you something else nobody ever does. They don't print their email and put it under the magnet on the refrigerator. When I was doing full page ads, people would tell me they had 7 of the ads stuck to the refrigerator before they got around calling. The digital era has in some ways ruined marketing. In other ways, it's given us this big, I'll use the word Parthenon, this big palette that we can expand on.
Yeah, no, totally agree.
So real quick, you're just released, and congratulations, it's coming out on Amazon today. And it's your new book. And I've read I think I've read every book that you've ever written. And the book is called 6 Simple Steps to Add 100 New Students.
Yeah.
And I know I'd like to focus on a lot of those ideas today as well. But I'll ask you one question that's for me, sometimes we hear, or I feel even myself, that doesn't work anymore. Or, digital marketing is, it's not as good as it used to be. And we tend to make our own decisions on things that we believe is factual, when in reality, you just said, this stuff is still working. Right.
Yeah.
And, you're a big, I think the last time we did a podcast, you were talking about booths and movie theaters and fairs and all different things that what we consider old school grassroots guerrilla marketing tactics. And no one's doing them anymore. We've gotten so lazy because it's so easy to hire an agency and they run ads for us and we get leads and we don't have to do anything.
And that's just the sure route to mediocrity.
Right.
Yeah.
Agreed. So what are your thoughts on now and what are you finding that all the clients that you coach, you have super successful schools?
We've got a bunch of them that are going to be $1 million or more this year. We have a handful that are targeting 2 million in the next 18 months. Any number of them. we're at 1.3 or 1.5 million in 2023. Go ahead, Dwayne.
I say before you get into that, and I remember a conversation with you. You said that, you would rather work with someone that and I forget the exact term, but basically you were saying somebody that has a poor mindset, a poor money mindset is really difficult for you as a coach to work with. You would rather work with somebody that has a better money mindset. So with that in mind, when people hear, well, somebody's going to do 1 million or 1 million, 1.2 million in a year, they can't wrap their head around that.
Oh yeah.
Can you kind of expand upon that first?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I'll give you one example. We have many, but Ben Brown. I've got a bunch of video of Ben and one thing or another. In fact, he sent me a text exchange that he was having with one of his associates. When I started working with him, I think it's been 18 months ago. Don't hold me to that. 20. It's been less than 2 years. He's a Muay Thai school, predominantly adults in California, and he's up. I believe it's north of San Francisco. He's up in that area in Northern California. And when I started working with him, he was doing $16,000 a month. He took over the school from his father. He and his father have essentially taken a vow of poverty for now 20, 25 years to run this Muay Thai school, right? He's training fighters. He's working with fighters, one thing or another. So this is like hardcore, real stuff, Muay Thai. And last month he did 74,000. He was pissed off that he missed his target of 75,000. And by the way, all these schools, Dwayne, the mistake that I see happen to the industry is we look at one big school in, I don't know, North Carolina or somewhere, and they have a big warehouse. They have like people coming and going all over the place. They have 22 different curriculums. They have all this stuff, and they're touting big student numbers and big revenue. But in almost all cases, those guys are broke. What they're doing is if they're grossing 100,000 a month, they're spending 97,000 to keep the thing open, right?
Yeah.
A lot of my close friends, who have over the years touted really, really big top line numbers. I was privy to going through the drawers and looking at the P&L, and I was always saying, you got to cut this, you got to cut this, you got to get rid of this, and so our guys, if a school's doing 75,000 a month, they're going to be net 30 to 40,000 a month.
Right.
So they're going to be 50 to 60% to the bottom line, sometimes better, right?
Yeah.
But like in Ben's case, it's one curriculum, one focus. It's improving student retention dramatically because his dropout rate was a big problem before.
Right.
It's improving the average revenue per student much more. So, charging them more upfront, charging them more monthly, having a strong renewal process. And in the process of raising his tuition appropriately with all the right structures, he doubled the number of students he has, which again, Dwayne, as you know, I called you Dwayne. It's too early for me, but I'm on martial arts time, so I'm used to working from 3 to 9 p.m. Mountain Time.
Right, you stayed up late last night.
Yeah, and I stayed up late, hooked on Presumed Innocent, among other things. But the thing about pricing, before you get into the marketing, the thing about pricing is people get it backwards. They think I can have this price and this many students, or this price and this many students. I have a degree in economics. We call that the elasticity of supply versus demand, or price versus demand. And what we find in martial arts is it's a reverse function. In other words, as I raise the price, people want it more. It's an interesting parallel, because what martial arts students want is they want the best instructor they can find. And then they figure out if they can work into the budget. They don't go, these guys are $100 a month, these guys are $400 a month, therefore I'm going to go to the cheapest. They say, I want the best. And there's a great book, Influence, Science, and Practice by Robert Cialdini. In it, his quote is, I'm stealing this from him, he says, absent other objective criteria, price determines perception of value. Now think about that. If I have if I have something that I can hang my hat on, I want, 2x4s. They're this, well, 2x4, I guess, 2x4s or this kind of wood. I don't know anything about construction, but that I can compare. These guys have 2x4s for X, and these guys have 2x4s. It's a commodity, right?
Yeah.
Or
Oak compared to pine.
yeah, exactly. There you go. There you go. You know more about it than I do. I know that we break pine and oak is bad.
Yeah.
But I was at a tournament with June Reed one time, and he was going to do the speed break, and they handed him what looked like a pine board, turned out to be an oak board. So he's trying to do the speed break with this board that was about double the normal thickness. And so the rest of the weekend we're walking around with his hand bandaged.
Oh
Wow.
gosh.
Anyway, but yeah, so as far as getting the head around it, Ben was that prototypical. We've got him on video saying, "Pardon my language, I thought you were full of shit. You told me
Yeah.
this, I thought it was complete bullshit. I thought I'd just give it a try, but I thought you were a huckster." And then, what happened is his gross doubled in 6 months, and then he ended up at 50 or something like that, more or less. And then last month, like I said, 18, 19 months later, he's at 74,000, and by the end of the year, he'll be 100,000 a month.
Well,
And by the way, he hasn't watered down anything. He's keeping his students longer. He hasn't added 22 different programs, and he's not doing Cage Fit and Taibo and whatever else people, throw in there. He's doing his Muay Thai. He's having better quality outcome with his Muay Thai. He's getting more students with his Muay Thai. He's still predominantly adults, although he has kids as well. And the only thing that's changed is the student quality has gone up, the bottom line has gone up exponentially, and the top line has grown dramatically.
well, I
Yeah.
just remember working with you, and I don't remember the time frame, but it probably was a good 6 months before you just said to me, you go, Dwayne, when are you going to do what I'm telling you to do?
Do something, yeah.
Yeah. And then my biggest thing was the price. I was like at 139, and I wanted to go to 169 at that time. And again, this is probably 14 years ago, 15
Yeah.
years ago. And then of course you had introduced us to Dan Kennedy. And so I was listening to Dan Kennedy, and Dan Kennedy's just like, just stand and look in the mirror and say, yes, the price is 169, ma'am.
Yeah.
And get used to it. And then, so I remember the first time I did that, and they go, okay. And I was
Yeah.
like, holy crap, I've been waiting this
Yeah.
long to do it. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't do it.
Yeah. I hate when that happens, right? And then you say to yourself, well, all these years I could have been at 179 or whatever the case may be.
Well,
And
and
I had that poor mindset. Like,
Yeah.
and you were still willing to work with me, but I had that poor mindset. And
I remember
in
slapping you
retrospect,
around verbally a few times.
yes, but I deserved it. And I needed it too. But I guess now in retrospect, when you had told me that story that you'd rather work with people that, had a better mindset on money, that was probably directed to me, but I didn't catch it. So,
Well, it was pretty much directed at 98% of the industry, to be fair. So don't take it personally. Two or three short stories on pricing. When I opened the schools, I compared Dallas, Phoenix, and Denver when I was getting ready to open. I was in Washington, D.C. I knew that Tulsa was too small. It wasn't where I wanted to go back to. I'm from Tulsa. But, I compared the three and ultimately chose Denver because of lifestyle. I liked the mountains and one thing or another. I thought at the time Dallas had a little bit more competition. In reality, it wouldn't have made any difference. But when I came to Denver, the first thing I did is I shopped everybody. So none of them knew me. So I went and took intro lessons if they had intro lessons or one thing or another at all the schools. And on average, the highest price schools were charging half of what we were charging at the Junior Institute. And then it went kind of down from there, right? So I looked at all of that, thought about it, and then I just kind of stole the Junior Institute price sheet and used their pricing and duplicated it there. So I launched from zero, charging double what the next highest school was in the entire metro area, right? And then within about 24 months now, they didn't like me because of this, but
Sure.
within about 24 months, I had probably 50% market share of the entire metro area, right? I mean, it was just incredible. And then, old enough to remember, the last Karate Kid movie's coming out soon. The first Karate Kid movie, back when Ralph Macchio actually looked young.
Yeah.
But the first Karate Kid movie in that era, I, was somehow, and I remembered what June Rhee had done with Enter the Dragon. It goes that far back. And so when I saw it come out, I went and saw an early preview screening and said, wow, this is going to be great for us. So I was set up in all the theaters. I had booths, I had posters when Karate Kid, that nobody knew was going to be a hit, came out. My schools were so full, we didn't have any place to put them. Now, to be fair, the whole industry blew up then, and the kids market blew up then, but I was ahead of the curve on that. My Lakewood school, which was 2,400 square feet, got to about 650 active students, right? And it was a zoo. Just didn't have any place to put them. And so I decided, again, I went back to my economics degree and made a stupid assumption. I said, well, if I raise the prices 50%, maybe the volume goes down 25 or 50%. I'll just raise the prices until we have a manageable number of people in the school. And every time I raised the price, our closing percentages improved and our active count went up. Then I'd raise the price again and our closing percentages would improve and the active count went up. And I was already charging double the next highest person in the metro area at that point. So again, every time I raised the price, people thought this must be the place to be, and it went up. Now you can probably get to a point where you tap that out. But I've talked to school owners in Malibu, California, in the financial district of New York, and you name other places that are exclusive enclaves, and they say, oh, my students are too smart to pay that much for martial arts. Then I'll talk to somebody, and this is one of my clients in Mankato, Minnesota, doing 800, 900,000 a year. Mankato, Minnesota, they'll say, well, the average income is only $45,000. I can't charge that. Dodge City, Kansas, I can't charge that because of the income level. In both cases, they're excuses, right? You've got to show value, be positioned as and the reality of the highest quality school in town, and then it's easy.
Yeah, it totally makes a difference. And
Yeah.
I kind of look at it now as maybe I'm wrong in thinking this, but as almost a badge of honor, because I'll have people say, I hear that you're the most expensive in town. And I go, I guess it depends upon, what you consider expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I always say, compared to what? Like, what is it that they're comparing it to? So Sensei, like, I know that everyone's out there, probably school owners are going to probably say, and even in my head, I'm thinking it a bit like, in my area, it's oversaturated with competition. And I know we say we have competition with, soccer, t-ball, football. I don't even think any of these things, including martial arts schools, are actual competition. I think it's boredom, laziness, non-committed parents and students and so on. But my one question is, like, within a 5-mile radius of my school, we have 15 schools. So, like, for example, we have a group called East Islip Moms on Facebook. Someone will say, I need a karate school for my 5-year-old. It's like vultures coming in, like every single person. There's like 25 different schools posting their ad and their special. How do you separate yourself from all that noise when when you happen to be the most expensive, or do you not bother trying to separate yourself? How do you get past that when you have that thick of competition?
Well, no, you always want to set yourself apart from the crowd. Back in, I don't know, what would have been now, 1981, 1982, there's a great book, I think it's still available, called Positioning: The Battle for Your Mind. And the examples that were used are super dated. It was the release of the IBM PC, among other things.
Right.
But the point that it made was, you're setting a perception of what you stand for and who you are into the prospect's mind, right?
Right.
The favorite question I have, you didn't say it this way, but is, why are you so much expensive than everybody else?
Right.
Or why are you charging double what that guy is? And my answer is, I don't know why he thinks that's what the value is of his program.
Right.
I know the value of our program is way more than we're charging. We need to actually raise the tuition. That's my answer to that question. But I think there's a deeper answer to it, and it's a more sophisticated marketing answer. Dwayne, you mentioned Dan Kennedy. To steal a term from him, Parthenon I stole from Jay Abraham. That's why I have the Wall Street facade back there.
Right.
Pillars. But a term I stole from Dan was marketing in a vacuum. see, if I am doing the same digital crap everybody else is doing, and I mean only that, think about this. Back in, 20 years ago, I could have the full page ad in the yellow pages. And
Right.
what I knew is everybody I'm getting already had the idea to train in martial arts. They had to open the book to judo and then karate and then martial arts, because that was the key word, right? Is they
Yeah.
had to open the page to that book. And now they're going through everybody. And what I was trying to do is get them to call me or get them to call me first, right? And the number one criteria in the yellow pages was location. So they're looking for the one that's closest to them.
Right.
But what I was getting was, we used to say our least favorite, leads are the yellow pages. Why was that? Because they were calling everybody in the book and shopping, right?
Mm.
Now, if I'm fighting for somebody in the mom's discussion group and I'm waiting for somebody to Google and pull up my Google listing, I'm just competing with everybody else and I'm fighting for them, right? On the other hand, if I market in a vacuum, so the digital marketing in a vacuum is Facebook or comparable, because now they're not doing search marketing. They're, we're getting in front of them without them, having the thought already they're going to do martial arts. But if I'm the guy in their elementary school and I'm the person at an event and I'm rounding them up through referral systems because they're bringing in their friends, whether it be birthday parties or buddy days or whatever it might be, I'm getting to them in a vacuum before they're out shopping everybody.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I think the bigger answer to that is, one, it's not hard to be better than everybody else in your city. Unfortunately, people get pissed off at me about saying this, but we're in an industry where most people have no idea what they're doing.
Right.
And and now, most of them are going to be new within a couple of years. There's a super high failure rate. The other thing is a lot of these schools, before COVID, they were 150 students. Now they're at 20. They haven't figured out how to get back, right?
Right. Right.
So it's not hard to compete with them. But my perspective has always been I don't even worry about that. When I
Right.
was doing TV and newspaper all the time, what I knew is I was feeding people to every school in town. They would
Yes.
actually, a few of them actually had the balls. They'd come up and say, "When are you going to be back on TV? Because that's really helps us." And
Right.
of course, I'd say, "Well, you're not in competition. Maybe why don't we just divide up the budget by 8, and you can chip in?" Well, I never could get them to do that.
Yeah.
But I knew that all of my marketing was feeding them. Junri, back in the 70s when he was in the Washington Post and on the Kung Fu TV series and all that stuff, he was feeding everybody else as well. Because what we were doing is expanding the market for martial arts instruction, not competing with the guy down the street.
Well, and that's why, like, I don't want to say turn them off, but I reduced the amount of school speeches that I do because I would get people excited. You can't bring them in, you can't bring the passes in, or they wouldn't let you bring it in. But I would still go in and do the speech, and you get people excited. And I know that I helped other schools out. So, you talk about marketing in a vacuum. That's why when we still do it now, we do martial arts field trips. So it's character development field trips where 2 or 3 classrooms come to our school for a 2-hour character development field trip. Of course, parents have got to fill out a waiver, right, in order to let their kid go on the field trip. I have all their contact information.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's just one of the examples of what you're talking about, marketing in a vacuum.
Well, and let's take what you're talking about. Number one, Dwayne, I'm happy to, enthusiastic about, and not worried at all about helping all the other guys. The problem that I had in Denver back when I opened to begin with is everybody else was so crappy that if somebody had had an interaction with a martial arts school, they had probably had a bad experience, right? So all the good ones, I'm thrilled to see them succeed. I'm happy with it. If I had somebody who was down the street and they came in and said, "What are you doing?" I opened the books and showed them what was going on and helped them. They all hated me because I was doing so well, but most of them didn't have the temerity to come say, "Can you tell me what you're doing?" The ones that did, one of them was Terry Bryan. I helped him get to $1 million back in the early 80s. I am happy for their success because it doesn't make any difference. Now, what you talked about with doing the school talk is Barry Vanover took the idea. It was really, to be fair, it was developed with Greg Silva and I back in the early 80s. I called it PE teacher for the day. But he started popularizing it as a school talk. So I go into Mrs. Jones' second grade class and I give a little presentation, one thing or another. And then I tell him, come down on Saturday. Well, that doesn't work with the crap. As you just said,
Yeah.
it works well enough that people will get kind of baited into doing a few more of them, but it doesn't work well enough to justify the time. On the other hand, if I go in and teach 500 kids, they come to me or I go to them, I don't particularly care. I'd rather them come to me, but if I go to them, but I get permission slips ahead of time.
Yep.
So I get parent name, address, and phone number. Over the years, we added a little checkbox to the permission slip. All the kids participate today will receive 2 free weeks of lessons, a free uniform. If you're interested, check yes. And that would give us permission to do outbound calls. Because the only time the school ever got mad at us is when we're doing, we're interrupting people at dinner to follow up on the deal that they weren't interested. So if they gave us permission, then it eliminated that blowback, right? But then all of a sudden, I go to a school with, let's say, 500 kids. I probably get 400 permission slips back. The number was 75 to 85%. So I probably get 400 permission slips back. Now I've got 60% of them more or less that have said yes, they're interested. So I have 240 people who've given me permission to follow up on them. And I have 400 that I'm going to follow up on. I'm just going to follow up by direct mail. Nobody ever complains about that. I'm going to follow up by email. And then the ones who checked yes, I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to make outbound calls. I'm going to schedule appointments. And of course, what we know is, in the age of digital plus cell phones, outbound calls are more difficult than ever too. Because guess what? Nobody answers an unknown number anymore.
Right.
So
Yeah, amen to that.
there's a whole series of things to do to solve that, or at least to improve it. But again, given the example, right, is we've had summers where a bus is showing up at the school every hour on the hour, and they're getting off with permission slips and the contact information. But for me, different eras are different. There's been eras where TV and newspaper were the best, but there were eras where direct outreach with the elementary schools were the most productive. Until Columbine hit, and then it didn't work for a couple of years because I had 3 schools within 2 miles of Columbine when that happened, by the way. So it changed the dynamic of working with schools for at least 18 months. They were afraid somebody's going to leave a bomb in the bleachers or something. But the elementary schools, like one of the turnarounds I did for my own schools is I did 480 enrollments in 9 months. 78, I think, was the best month. 36 enrollments in 1 day, all from doing outreach with elementary schools. In this case, it was PE teacher for the day, followed by a school enrichment program. But it was literally, I had so many people coming in that it was like I had to, kind of tell 20 people at a time, here's the price sheet, and, throw a check on the desk. But it works tremendously well. But again, if I go into a school and I do a great demo, I take 22 kids in the gymnasium, that was just entertainment. I come in and do a speech. Well, it's a little better maybe, but it's still just kind of entertainment. I do a speech and I give out passes. It's a little bit better. I get permission slips. I teach a class, so it's experiential.
Yeah.
And then I follow up on the kids, even better. And then the best, of course, would be I'm teaching the kids while the parents are there, and I'm talking to the parents while the kids are there, and I'm making a follow-up appointment. But in an environment like an elementary school, that's a harder thing to have happen. Although the best opportunity for that is coming up for back to school. We've had schools that have done as many as 450 appointments in a week from back to school days and so forth. So, but that's a different subject.
Yep. So I know with the time left, if we could kind of focus in maybe a little bit more, not that some of these things might not be in your book, but I would really like to kind of talk about your book if you're okay with that.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to argue with that.
Can I ask a question first?
Go ahead.
So, and then Dwayne, you could jump in. So this is a kind of a personal question for me. We get a ton of leads and then trial classes set up, appointments made for adults. Mm-hmm. And I find nowadays that adults don't show up. Like I'll get 95% of the people that set an appointment, scheduled it on our calendar, they don't come in. And then they won't return calls. We put them in our automations. We call them, we email, text. What is your suggestion to get through that? Or is that something that you see? Like kids, no problem. Mm-hmm. Teenagers, no problem. But the adult market, and I say adults 15 years to 60, I cannot seem to get those people to come in anymore.
Well, we could, I mean, this could be a long conversation, but if, here's a thumbnail is, well, the agency types, and by the way, I have any number of them that I work with that I love. They do a great job. I've met Gus. I like him. He does a great job. It's
Yeah.
not that they do a bad job. When I talk to the agencies, normally it's in the context of their biggest problem is they generate a lead and they take it to whatever point they take it to, some of them to
Right.
a point of making an appointment, and then the client screws it up and blames them,
Right.
right?
Right.
That's the cycle, right? Whatever point they hand it off is the point at which it gets screwed up. And what happens is if let's say I do a landing page and it's a free or it's paid offer
Yeah.
and somebody schedules their own appointment, that is still a super flaky lead, right?
Okay.
There's been no human contact. They
Right.
haven't talked to me on the phone. I haven't talked to them on the phone. A web page, a landing page, a lead funnel, none of that replaces a human being talking to a human being, right?
Okay.
So the mistake that gets made is they think, and when I say they, school owners and it's either they are fixated with the technology. And by the way, I use all the crap that you can possibly do. We autoresponder text and voicemails and autoresponder sequential direct mail and so forth. But the most productive way to talk to somebody is either face to face or on the phone. And I would call being on Zoom comparable, but mostly, with us, it's going to be on the phone or it's going to be face to face. The second most productive communication mechanism would be to something to land in their mailbox so that they have something tangible and physical. The number of people who are following and see from a digital marketing standpoint, my mission is always to go from online to offline as quickly as possible. Now, if we get an offline lead, in other words, they come to a birthday party or they come to, a booth or something, we're going to move them also, not solely, but also to online follow-up, right? So I can do a booth, get a bunch of leads and retarget them on Facebook, retarget them on Google, do sequential autoresponder email, sequential autoresponder text message, sequential autoresponder voicemail. But I can also then continue to follow up with direct mail, sequential autoresponder, and I can get them on the phone. The biggest problem with getting them on the phone is two things. One is people don't answer a phone that has an unknown number, right? I
Right.
have my iPhone set up. If it's an unknown number, it doesn't even ring the phone. If it's an unknown recipients from a text message, I don't answer the phone. Well, the solution to that is you've got to get your contact record into their phone,
Okay.
right? So the first thing you do, technically it's called a V card, but think of it just as a contract record. If I have an Android phone or I have an iPhone, I just, create the name, the business name, the address, the email address, the phone number or phone numbers that you might be calling from. Once that's in their phone, it white labels or white lists, not label, white list their email, it white list your phone coming in, it white list your text. So now it's no longer an unknown caller, it's a known caller. Right. So that's number one is if I'm face to face belly to belly with, I'm going to share my contact record. If it's online, one of the first autoresponders is going to be sharing the contact record. Here's our contact record, add it to your phone. So you'll know how to get hold of us. If it's us calling,
Right.
you'll know that it's us. Number two is here's the cycle that most martial arts schools do. And I know as we're working with the agencies and trying to, fix the problems between what happens with them and the schools, is a new lead comes in, shows up in the school owner's email box. Susie shows up at 4 o'clock and starts returning calls. So she goes through the voicemail, she goes through the email, she goes to the leads, starts returning calls. And now the lead came in at 9 a.m. and I'm returning the call at 4 p.m. And there's, what would that be? 10, 11, 12, 7 hour gap, right? What we know is the effectiveness, if I call them while they're looking at the landing page, is massively different than if I wait an hour, is massively different than if I wait 3 hours. When I opened my schools years ago, first thing June Rhee did when I moved to Washington, D.C. to work with them, and, here I was, a teenage, straight A honor roll, National Merit Scholar, hot shit, fighter, all this stuff. And the first thing he did is put me on the switchboard. I thought, oh my God, I'm sitting here answering the switchboard. Well, it was the best possible lesson. And by the way, I was sitting about 5 feet from his office, which was terrifying enough. But all of a sudden, I was answering inbound info calls for 13 schools. Now, one of the things I knew with my schools when I opened is soccer moms calling for their kids on average called us between 9 and 11 a.m. And so if I had an answering machine on the phone, or nowadays a voicemail, but if I had an answering machine on the phone until 4 o'clock, when they called at 10 a.m., nobody answered the phone. If they were going through the yellow pages, whoever answered the phone first got them, right? And if they were calling around leaving voicemail, even back then, I ended up in this endless case of phone tag. And back then they were calling from a landline. If you called them at 7 o'clock in the night, they were likely to answer. Now they're on a mobile, they have unknown numbers blocked, and they're not likely to answer. On the other hand, if you just completed the form and you get a text of, hey, I'm trying to call you now, I'm available for answer any questions, and then the phone rings and it's you calling, now you're much more likely to get them by a factor of like 400 or 500%.
Wow.
And it's going to be much more effective to close an appointment. So the mistake to make is, and again, there's nothing wrong with they schedule their own appointment. It doesn't replace, I've got to initiate an outbound call immediately. Right. And my ideal, by the way, back in the Karate Kid era, if we had 70 intros in a month, they were mostly inbound calls, right? That doesn't happen much anymore. But my ideal is they call me and I've got to answer the phone when they call, right? So I went to probably 30 years ago, phones were answered 24/7. So, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., a live staff member was answering the phone. One of my guys, 9 p.m. to 9 a.m., we had an outsourced answering service answering the phone that was trained and so forth on the scripting. But we had the phones answered 24 hours a day. But the important window was 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. for the kids market, because that's when the moms called. If it was a non-working mom, she took the kids to school, looked to see what needed to start, and then pulled out the Valpak coupon or pulled out the ad or pulled out her notebook and started making outbound calls. If she was a working mom, let's say she worked at a law firm, maybe she was a lawyer, she'd drop off the kids, she'd go to the office, check her, nowadays her email and her Slack or whatever, see what was going on, if she has any meetings or so forth. Then she'd go sit down at her desk and return calls, right? So it was the same cycle, that there was a window where if we weren't answering the phone, it was a problem. And by the way, with online, it changes the dynamic of there being a narrower window because people can opt in at any time. But if I don't have somebody who's going to initiate and follow up, and what we do is we do autoresponder voicemail, ringless. We do autoresponder text. We do autoresponder email. We do sequential autoresponder direct mail. Of course, that has a time lapse to it, right? It takes 2 or 3 days to get there. But also we have a live human being. So the live human being, if a lead comes in for our company, a text will go to Bob. And Bob gets a text with who it is and their phone number. And, we're looking at, how many students do they have? What are they grossing? And if they're qualified, he's making an outbound call to them. But he's initiating a call, hopefully, while they're still looking at the web page they opted into.
Interesting. That's a great answer. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long answer, but you get the idea.
No, it's a lot. Yeah. It makes sense. I remember when I was at my school from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day, and we would answer the phone. I was amazed at how many calls came in during the early morning hours, and I was always there to answer, always scheduling the appointment, and my secretary or program manager would follow up just to remind them and get them in. So we had a good show up ratio that way too. Now a lot of it is done by automation and digital or AI or whatever. So it doesn't
that stuff is a nice supplement, but it doesn't replace a human being talks to a human being.
Right.
You've still got to build the relationship. Now, the other thing I said in there was the direct mail component, though, is almost nobody I talk to does that, right? But it ultimately comes down to return on investment. I know with one of my schools, if we enroll a new student, that student is going to be worth $7,000 to $10,000, right? That's the lifetime value.
Right.
And I also know the day they enroll, they're going to pay $600 to $800.
Mm.
So if they're going to pay $500 plus the day they enroll, and if they're going to be worth $7,000, is it worth an 84 cent or 69 cent or whatever it is nowadays postcard? Is it
Right.
worth five of them? Is it
Right.
worth a letter with a package? Yeah, I mean, if I have some of our, I hate the word, but I think Russell Brunson came up with the whole funnels thing that took over the language. But if I have somebody who's going to be worth, enough money, if I spend $50 on them and I only get 10% of them, or if I only get 1 out of 10 more, $50, if I get 1 out of 10 more, um, for 10 leads is only $500. And if they're worth 10,000 or 7,000, why wouldn't I spend that money? Right.
Right. All right, Dwayne, you had some questions on the book.
Well, yeah, I'm just.
Well, hey, go ahead, Dwayne. But I had a couple of graphics from the book I was going to show everybody because I
Yeah.
think it isolates this down.
Well, first off, and I'll give you the permission to share
Yeah.
any of those. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
yeah, I got to figure out how to do it.
Right at the bottom.
Hit one way is hit the little three dots and make me co-host.
Oh, well, that would make a difference, wouldn't
That's a shortcut.
it? All right. So the three dots on you.
Yeah. And it'll say make host, make co-host.
There we go.
Okay. There. Yeah. So let me see if I can get the right screen. I always have too much crap open on my desk.
And while you're trying to find that, I'm curious what prompted you. I have an idea, but what prompted you to even write this book? Because you obviously have multiple books.
Yeah. I did that extraordinary marketing program years ago. And one of it was actually three books. It had how to market your martial arts school online on the internet. That was written in 1999. Obviously, 90% of what was in it is dated, all the search stuff and everything. The other one was direct response marketing for martial arts schools. Everything in there is still as valid as it was then. I just haven't gotten around to updating it. And then the third one was everything I wish I knew when I was 22, which
That one's really good.
yeah, well, that's what I was going to say is it became the thing that it was a complete afterthought. I had ridden my Harley up to Aspen one day, and I was sitting in a little restaurant bar next to Kurt Russell. I don't know Kurt. He just lives, he and Goldie, at least then, had a house in Aspen. But I sat there with, my early laptop that I had lugged up there and wrote the book in about 12 hours. And it turned out to be the thing that I had least labored over that everybody liked the best. Yeah, here's the new book on Amazon, The 6 Simple Steps to Add 100 Students to your school. Like I said, it is available now, and as is the drill. It's only paperback in full color. Full color is important because of all the illustrations and examples. It helps get the idea, but we discounted it about 40% for today. The drill is get as many sales you can the first day, and they say it's a bestseller and all that kind of stuff. And of course, it's a business for martial arts schools, so bestseller doesn't mean very many copies. It just means it's in that category. But
Right.
here were the two things I was going to show you a minute ago, Dwayne, and then if we have a chance, I'll show you that follow-up sequence we were talking about. In fact, this is briefly, if you can see that's briefly kind of that follow-up sequence.
Yep.
Is to convert it. But without getting into that, here's what I wanted to show you is just basic principle. And it's more a way to think about it than anything else. If you can see that, is marketing Parthenon. And, I have newspaper ads here. They're not dead. They're just diminished. Newspaper inserts. There's a piece that most everybody gets on Tuesday in the mail, goes into the Wednesday newspaper with all the food coupons. That's technically a marriage mail piece, but it's one of the most effective things I ever did with the newspapers. Used to be called Red Plum, and now it's called, I don't know, Save or something like that. But if you look at this list, and you can do lead boxes or you can do rack cards. That's all very cheap. You can do bandit signs. That's all very cheap. Neither one of them are going to get much traffic, but they're going to get enough traffic to be worth the time and money. School outreach, search, buddy days, and so forth. But the idea is to have a lot of stuff going on every month. If you want to have 20 enrollments every month, have 20 things going on. Don't just be paying somebody for Facebook ads. Now, do pay somebody to do Facebook ads, and you probably should use an agency rather than do it yourself. It takes a lot of knowledge, a lot of management. I always recommend that. There's several that I know that are very good, but don't blame them for being flaky leads if you suck at follow-up, which pretty much everybody does. It's not their fault, right? But here's what I wanted to show you is this is the way I think about all of this stuff nowadays. Is you have a graph with all your marketing, and you can either spend money or you can do labor, right? Back when I had 6 schools and adjusted for inflation, I was doing $3.5 million. I was spending a fortune on TV and newspaper, right? That goes purely up into there wasn't a lot of labor. In fact, I put together a bunch of ads in the basement of my condo building in Falls Church, Virginia, back before I moved to Denver, that I used for 3 years in the newspapers. It was my soon-to-be wife, soon-to-be ex-wife doing a punch. Headline was Total Confidence. And ads I actually did for somebody else that he never used. I did probably 3,000 enrollments off of it. But you got to spend a bunch of money with cold direct mail, with marriage mail. That's Valpak Money Mailer, that other mailer I just talked about, television ads, newspaper, and so forth. But the other axis here is labor, right? So I can do things that are like very little labor and very little money. Referral events, walk-ins, drive-by, that's, obviously signage, bandit signs, rack cards, banners, A-frame signs. Referral events from my standpoint are great for you guys. They were great for me, but if I have less than 100 students, I really just don't have enough critical mass to do it, right? So if I was doing a grand opening, or if I was doing a turnaround from one of my schools over the years, I spent no time at all worrying about referral events. Why? If you have 40 students, what are you going to do? If you're starting from zero, you can't do anything. Now, if I have 300 students and I'm losing 2% a month, well, I can get 6, 7, 8 enrollments a month from referrals, and I'm in good shape, right? But this is the way I like to think about all of this stuff. Now, the reason I put Facebook ads and Google pay-per-click over here in the labor plus money is the reason you use agencies. Is Facebook ads burn out quickly. You have to be logging in basically every day. You want it, or at least weekly. You've got to be looking at what the results are. What's the cost per lead coming in? What's the exposure? What's the click-through rate? Same thing with Google pay-per-click ads. There's a lot of labor involved. It's just not you buy the advertising. When I bought Yellow Pages, we spent a lot of time crafting an ad, and then 18 months later, we had to do it again. But that was essentially the cycle. Once it was there for a year. With Google, you may end up having to change the ad, a couple times a month. With Facebook, you may have to be changing the ad even more often than that, or jiggering with the targeting. So I think in everything in terms of how much money is it going to cost in buying media, and how much labor is going to be involved. And you'll see there's a lot of this stuff that's high labor and relatively low expense. And that's all the stuff you talked about at the beginning, is the movie theater promotions. I mean, if I had a booth out there at the big AMC multiplex during Inside Out, I would have kicked ass. If I had a booth out there during what's it called, the Despicable Me movie that just came out, I would have kicked ass. And that's something else that people thought was dead. I mean, COVID tried to kill the movie theaters. My favorite chain, Regal, United Artists, they filed bankruptcy. AMC became a meme stock, which I guess was good for them. But there's all these different things that happen over the summer. I had one of my clients who made 75 appointments on 4th of July. So this is the thing. These are all from the book, by the way. Is one way to think about it is, do I have no money or very little money, so therefore am I focused on labor? Or do I have cash flow, so can I do things that are more expensive? And frankly, some of the bigger schools, the way they spend money is they hire people to do the labor-intensive stuff, right? So back when I was doing Karate Kid, I had 13 booths going the same weekend. Well, I wasn't running any of them. I had staff in all of them. So in essence, the cost of labor was the expense of doing the thing. It wasn't the expense of the booth or one thing or another. So I did that quickly, but I think it helps to think about it is, if I have cash flow, now I can gear up. I can do every door direct. I can do targeted direct mail. I could do maybe a spot TV. Still, I could do banner ads on my local newspaper websites. I can do all that kind of stuff. But go back to what you said about the Facebook. The problem is not that it's not a great source. If I do all these breakdowns in the book of this stuff. I mean, so it's real data. But if I want 100 leads a month, I may be able to get 25 or 30 or 40 of them, maybe even 50 or 60 of them from Facebook. But if that's all I'm doing, number one, it tends to be a little flakier source than some of the other stuff. Again, I'm happy to spend $50 a lead. I'm happy to spend $200 per intro because then I'm going to spend $400 or $500 per enrollment. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to do it all day long, but I got to have a bunch of other stuff going on at the same time to build out that Parthenon of activities.
Hmm. Such great information. I find when I do coaching for school owners, it's very hard to get them to do all this stuff. I hear so many times, I'm so busy, I'm tired, I don't have enough time in the day. I recently had to fire a client because no matter what I told him to do, he never got around to doing it. And every week he wanted a new idea. I said, I'm not in the business of just giving you ideas. I want to actually track your results and see you improve. So I think, what is your suggestion there? Like with schools that, how many different marketing, should they start with a few and build upon them, or have a funnel of different marketing tactics every month? What are your thoughts on someone building out a marketing campaign?
Well, that's rudely, although you didn't answer the question, give my thoughts on the first guy. That's go work for somebody else.
Yeah.
Right? That's go get a day job, clock in, clock out, retire on the job, and complain about your boss. Right. The problem with being self-employed is you're the boss. It's the old joke. The good thing is I'm my own boss. The bad news is my boss sucks. Right. The until you have critical mass, there's no. I mean, you can either fund a school with lots of cash in the bank, which when I opened all the schools, it was my father loaned me $10,000 and I had a pocket full of credit cards. And that turned into, a multi-million-dollar operation by the time I was 25. But it was working 18 hours a day.
Yeah.
And it was working 18 hours a day on things that a lot of them would have been less efficient and less effective than what I would do now.
Right.
But it was, the vast majority of the time, if I did a startup, it was 12 hours a day of marketing and 3 or 4 or 5 hours a day of actually running the school, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was a small number of hours doing intros, doing enrollments, teaching the classes, a lot of hours doing the marketing. So
Right.
I think of it as 100 students. Until I get to 100 students, which in our format should be a $30,000 to $40,000 a month school or better. But until I'm at 100 students, I got to work my butt off, and I've got to do all the different stuff to be out there and do that. Now, once I'm at that point, I can figure out whether to spend money or whether to spend time or whether to hire somebody to do the time. In my case, I was big enough quickly enough that I was hiring a lot of people to do it, and my problem wasn't in I was having to work too hard. I was working, a lot. But it was in getting the other people to do the work that of the things I knew worked. But so how much should you be doing? Well, every one of these things is going to have a different ratio. You talk about the adults, but everyone's going to have a different ratio, right? If I'm getting Facebook leads and I convert 50% of them to appointment, and then I get 75% of them to show up and half of them or more to enroll, that's probably a pretty good average benchmark, right? If I go to a live event booth, I may get 100 leads. I should get about 75 to 90% of them make an appointment. But if I have 75 appointments, I'm going to have 30 intros and I'm going to have 12 or 17 enrollments, right? I know what the ratios are on each of those things.
Right.
So if I'm building a marketing plan, I want to go through it. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's best case. Here's worst case. Let's take the worst case numbers. How many enrollments do I need this month? Let's say 20. And so if I need 20 enrollments a month, I've got to have enough stuff going on to generate 20 enrollments. The small people, the small schools, they want to rely on organic social media, and I'm organically having people find my website on Google Maps.
Right.
That's not going to get you very far, right?
Right.
Not nothing, but it's not going to get you very far. Then the next level, they want to pay an agency to get them Facebook leads, and they want to pay somebody to do pay-per-click. Okay, well, that's better, but it's not going to get you from 50 to 300 students. And frankly, if you're at 300 students, it's not going to keep you there, right? You've got to have a lot of other stuff going on in order to supplement that, and it can't all be online.
Right.
Well, wouldn't you say that
Yeah.
part of that, I don't know, for us as martial arts school owners, we got into martial arts because we love the martial arts. We maybe even love teaching, but that whole business back end stuff, which actually supports the other two loves, I think that's where I found that the problem has been with a lot of school owners is it's that business side where they, one, don't even understand business, but two, they don't enjoy the business side.
Yeah.
And then to your point, that's probably when you would say, well, then go work for someone else.
Yeah. Go teach for somebody, right?
Yeah.
Is, you know, this is slightly off subject, but the argument in the 60s, I used to have every black belt in Karate Illustrated. My friend George Chung just recently bought black belt. But I used to have all of the old karate magazines, Official Karate, all the way back from the early 60s. It kind of inherited them from my instructor. And the argument back in the 60s was the case against commercialism. There was a cover of Black Belt with Jun Rhee that was literally the headline, the case against commercialism. And he was the Pied Piper of Taekwondo. But I got to tell you, I can go back to all of those magazines, doesn't matter whether 60s, 70s, or 80s. And all the guys who are railing about being a traditionalist and, not wanting to do marketing and not wanting to be the Pied Piper and all that stuff, nobody's ever heard of them.
Right.
They've disappeared into the sands of time.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Jun Rhee, Ed Parker, Chuck Norris, Bruce Lee, and there's a longer list than that. I can go through all of those people. My instructor was Jun Rhee. They're icons of the industry. And Jun Rhee's not an icon because he wasn't a great martial artist. He's a great martial artist. He took Taekwondo throughout the world and he had locations in the old Soviet Union and was dubbed the father of Taekwondo. But it's also because he loved the PR, he loved the marketing, he loved the business development, right? You're not a business owner by just being a technician. And again, another old reference is the book, The E-Myth. The Gerber's logic was all businesses are founded by a technician who one day had an entrepreneurial seizure, right? And then their shock is, there's HR, there's sales, there's marketing, there's all this stuff. I think his example was Susie makes cakes or something.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But the idea is right. Once you decide to be a business owner or an entrepreneur, which are different, but once you've decided that you're going to be the boss, you've decided that you've got to master marketing, which is the most important and most difficult aspect of the business. And you've got to master the sales process. Now, we are not particularly salesy, but we have good closing rates because we're showing people the benefits and helping them get involved with something they want to do.
Right.
But the teaching, I co-wrote a book with Dan Kennedy years ago, and a lot of martial artists got pissed off because I said the cheapest role in the school, the thing I can hire all day long, and the thing that I can train quickest is the instructor, right? I for years had hundreds of high school kids who were as good as most fifth-degree black belt master instructors who teach part-time. And a lot of them are college, young adults. But I was training them on how to do the skill more than most martial arts instructors are actually teaching, right? So
Yes.
they were getting 10 hours a week of training on how to teach and then teaching 30 or 40 or 50 hours a week. So but people got mad at me because I was undervaluing that, right? Well, the most valuable person in the Jun Rhee Institute was Jun Rhee, because he was the one that was bringing in Muhammad Ali and getting press, bringing in Bruce Lee and getting press, teaching Congress and getting press, getting international news by having the Republicans versus the Democrats, fight at his tournament. That was the most valuable person in the organization. The guy actually down there at the front line who was teaching the classes day to day, which was me when I was in college, was the least compensated person until they learned how to market, sell, run the business, and put the other pieces together.
Yep. Yeah. So, give us, I mean, obviously the title, six simple steps to add 100 new students to your school. That kind of,
Right.
but what, I don't know, sell me on why I should buy it. Who's this for? Who's this book for?
Well, it's for any martial arts school owner who needs a boost to their marketing efforts, right?
Okay.
And it was frankly written for, which is not my normal audience, but it was written for the especially the smaller guys, because almost all of it. Now, I do talk about Facebook advertising and I do talk about Google, both pay per click and search, but most of it is grassroots. Most of it is how to be an icon in the elementary school, how to do live event marketing, how to do referral marketing, all of that kind of stuff. So the six simple steps are really live event marketing. It's community outreach, especially elementary school, or if you're in the adult market, the corporate market, referral systems, Facebook and Google, or they're separate categories. And then it's all the follow-up systems, that chart I showed you with lead comes in, they get a text, they get an email. How does all that work?
But also inside the book too, you have like real world examples. I mean, individuals that are actually utilizing these steps, right?
Never ending. Let me give you an example of that, which is again why we printed it in full color. Um, the cost that it's on at Amazon right now is the cost of printing. I didn't want to do it in black and white, but well, here's the first thing I stumbled across. So this is in the online section. Well, hell, I've always got too many things open on my desktop. You can probably appreciate that. Here
Certainly
we
can
go.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
And then how many screens are you operating with?
Three double size.
Yep.
So, here's like actual examples. This is Facebook advertising, but this is the individual school, how many leads they got that month, what their cost per lead was, what their ad spend was. I mean, this is just, real data of really what was going on at that point in time. But throughout it, what I did was, most of this is from our members only Facebook group. So, here's referral system. So here's how this actually looked, and you can't read it probably, but the descriptions are telling how many leads, how many intros, sometimes how many enrollments they got from any particular thing. Here, this is other Buddy Day promotions, oftentimes with a description of what happened. Here's an elementary school outreach. In this case, he had
20 or
33.
33 enroll, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm having trouble seeing my own stuff here, but here he had 125 in this program. Here he had he had
125 as well.
30,000, yeah, 30,000 in revenue or something like that from that. Uh, but again, the reason it was printed in color is you can actually read all this in the book. Um, but you get the idea. I mean, if we're talking about graphics on the school window, here's what it looks like. And if we're um, um, here's stuff that I did years ago. This is direct community outreach. This was a 16-page newspaper. This is one of our guys, Jeff Cielo. He had 100 kids in a school program here. Um, 38, I guess, intros as I'm reading through this clearly. But you get examples of actual stuff that I've done. This is a copy of a school program outreach flyer from one of my schools right outside of Jacksonville, Florida. Here's another one, direct doing PE classes. Here you got 70 permission slips, and 43 of them wanted more information about coming in for the class. but it's the actual. Here's this is this was not Children's Hospital, but this is a Children's Hospital flyers, what I call it. We did fundraiser, community outreach in the schools. I was printing these flyers at 100,000 at a clip and getting them passed out in the schools. When I taught that to Timcover, I became their single biggest marketing source. They always told me, no, in California, you can't do anything with the elementary schools. And finally, I got them to do this. And it was based upon this other one I showed you, this one and this one that I had done all the way back into the 80s. So that gives you an idea. I mean,
I was going to say what I like about it is that, not only you talking, are you giving the information but you are back, I don't want to say backing it up, but you really are. You're backing it up. The information that you're giving, you're backing up with real world statistics that are showing that this can actually be done. But this goes back to your point. There's work that you have to do in order to get those 100 students that you're looking to get.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You got to work your ass off. And again, my formula when I was doing startups were 100 students in the first month, 200 students in the first 90 days. And we were always at positive cash flow, really month one. But by month three, I was renewing all those first 100. So that got, so location one funded, location two funded, location three. And then what I did for my own schools over the years is I would periodically put myself into what was the lowest performing school and pull it up to the number one school. And my formula then was essentially the same, is it was to add 100 students. Now, oftentimes it wasn't 30 days, it was maybe 60 to 90 days, but that was the formula. Let's add 100 students, and then let's add 200 students, and I'd hand it off to somebody.
This is a little bit off topic, and I know we need to end here soon, but I'm curious because you're the first person that ever taught me this is paid in fulls. And is that something that, you still are okay with? Is there a percentage of paid in fulls that you only want to hit and you don't want to go higher than?
Oh, no, it's a really good question. And I think it gets a really bad name on two sides. Not to disparage anybody, but a couple times in the book, I have a picture of a lineup of bozos, and talk about the bozo explosion of consultants in the industry. And it feels like it's a new phenomenon, but it's not. Back when I first started doing coaching, back when you and I first started working together, my standing joke was, which was accurate, was I was doing it to rescue people from Fred Mertens. And what Fred was teaching is he had, extremely solid sales systems, no marketing tools, and was cashing everybody out. So you could take a friend of mine like Scott Kiefer, who started working with him. He passed away recently. May he rest in peace. Great guy. But Scott, it basically put him out of business, because what would happen is for about 3 or 4 months, they'd have their highest gross ever, go buy a Rolex, go buy a Corvette or whatever. And then all of a sudden, their gross would fall, dramatically, because guess what? If I've cashed everybody out and I don't have enough flow of new people, I'm screwed, right? So, Dwayne, I always want to have your billing, your monthly ACH, at the very least cover everything. It covers your salary, it covers the payroll, it covers the rent, it covers everything, preferably a lot more than that, right? And then on average, we're going to have that be 50 to 60% of the gross. And then the rest is going to be down payments on enrollments, down payments on renewals, and paid in fulls only on renewals, right? So what I see, the cycle has been repeated now a couple of times. There's some other consultants around. I'm now getting a flow of people who are getting rescued on the cash problem again, which is, all of a sudden they're cashing everybody out. I have one that I talked to a year ago. His gross has fallen by 50% since he started working with this other consultant at, I don't know, $1,000 a month or something like that. Well, why is it fallen? Well, it went like this for a while, and then it went like this, because they're regurgitating Fred's old crap of cash everybody out without having enough people come in the door.
Right.
So, Dwayne, if it's me, I don't like cash enrollments. And we're doing new enrollments for a year. I like them to pay $500-$600 or more to enroll and pay monthly. And then in 2 or 3 or 4 months, I'm going to renew them anyway. And then when I renew them on a 3 to 6 year deal, if they want to pay cash, great. I'm going to give them a little bit of an incentive for it. But my rule of thumb was always, I'm either boosting the payment by 50 or 100%, or they're paying cash, and maybe about a third of them are paying cash. And the number of deals I've done over the years where somebody wrote me a check for, say, $32,000, I can't keep track of. It's big deals, but only on renewals and only as a portion of the total, and always with the billing where it's covering all of the expenses every month plus some, right? So if you take a school, some of the ones I talked to, I don't have their numbers top of my head, but Tim Harrison, who's in Joliet, I always mispronounce it, Joliet, Illinois.
Yeah, Joliet.
There you go, up in your neck of the woods. But at his school, if he does 120 in a month, and he's $1.5 million this year, just teaching predominantly traditional Taekwondo. But at 120, let's say, his billing will probably be 75 to 85,000, right? So he's going to do some cash deals. The cash will boost it, but a lot of that in-house cash is just they pay more when they enroll, they pay more when they renew, as well as a few cash deals only on the renewals.
I appreciate that clarity.
Yeah, great info.
Yeah, but every time I turn around, there's somebody else going through the industry, and they sign people up, they get them all excited, they cash out everything, and then they put them out of business, right? And
they cash themselves out of business.
Yeah, and it's happening again. I mean, and again, if I had 100 intros a month coming in, I can get away with that. However, I can't get away with bad service, bad retention, and cashing people out, because hell, my schools have been here for 42 years. You can do that for 3 or 4 years, but sooner or later, no matter how big the community is, they know that you're a crook.
Yeah,
right.
I hear you.
Yep.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you taking time to be on the podcast today, and obviously, we want to encourage everybody to go to Amazon and look up Stephen Oliver. His book is The 6 Simple Steps to Add 100 New Students to Your School. And I
actually just bought it.
There you go. Well, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I'm excited. It helps the rankings to get a bunch of them out. People keep asking me about the Kindle version. I read a lot of stuff on Kindle, but I never read anything on Kindle I'm trying to study.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And the reason, again, that I did it this way is all of this stuff is in Kohler, and it's all of the actual examples of what's actually working out in the field.
Right.
So it was hard to do that in black and white, and you certainly can't read it on my Kindle e-reader and get the gist of it. It's compared to the other stuff that you've read, not now, the 22 book was pretty breezy, easy read, but the Mile High Maverick book is pretty dense.
Yeah.
And most of the stuff that I put out tends to be dense because that's just, I work at that level of academics. This is not. This is, here's the steps. And the other thing I didn't show you, I know we're way out of time, and so am I, but if I can pull it up real quick, one of the bonuses we're giving people is a complete marketing checklist. So it's everything you need to do online, everything you need to do for your reviews, everything you need to do for referrals, for community outreach, et cetera. So it's a very complete checklist, and that's one of the bonuses.
Nice. That's terrific. I'm excited. I can't wait to get my version. I'll have it by tomorrow, they said.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Print on demand, and they're out right away.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. It's great seeing you and being on here with you, and let's do more in the future.
Yeah, let's not make it so long.
Okay,
I reached out to you 9 months ago, and then life got in the way.
Well, thank you for being on now.
Yeah, I want to, if people need to reach out to you, have questions about you, your coaching, everything, how do they get a hold of you?
The phone number is 720-256-0208 to my office, or it's martialartswealth.com.
Perfect. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Have a great day. Thanks,
You too.
Dwayne.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Martial Arts School Owner Talk podcast. This would not be possible if it weren't for the support of our amazing sponsors. Please check out Elite Insights for all your website needs. LeadHunterMedia.com, your online digital marketer and content provider. Academy Kings BJJ Growth Consulting and Management Group at GrowMyAcademy.com. SparkMembership.com, hands down the best martial arts software for school owner management on the planet. GetKarateStudents.com, a martial arts growth consulting company for all your systems. AddHealthCoaching.com, helping school owners create a whole nother revenue stream for their school. We will see you next time.